4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. It's been live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, welcome to Lichtman Live on a frosty Thursday evening, at least frosty where we are in the D.C. area, and I'm sure it's frosty in a lot of other places. So stay warm. And our politics is not thawing at all. It's getting frostier and frostier.
Wow.
And we're going to talk about something really important tonight, another effort to undermine the integrity of our democracy.
Those were some really good analogies, Dad.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Were those analogies or were they metaphors? They're more analogies.
Analogies.
Right? Okay.
More similes than metaphors.
I thought for similes you have to use the word like or as.
Yeah, but they kind of like it as.
I'll have to go back and double check. Our first topic of tonight today's our 200th episode. I don't know if...
Is it really?
Yeah, I kind of forgot about it.
Oh, we should have had a big celebration.
But when I was setting it up today, I was like, wait a second. It's our 200th episode.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So thank you all for tuning into now 200 episodes of Lichtman Live. It doesn't feel like 200 episodes, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I guess they pile up when you're not looking.
Yeah, what's the old saying? Time flies when you're having fun, right?
That's a good one.
Yeah. People are saying, yay, congratulations. Oh, it says 201? Is it 201?
I don't know.
No, I'm confusing myself.
You're the boss.
Oh, it does say 201. So we missed our 200th episode?
We missed it?
Huh.
Wow.
Now I'm confusing myself.
Yeah.
Well, whether it's 201 or 200, we are currently hitting or have hit our 200th episode. So
Amazing.
That's
pretty good staying power.
All right.
It's because we're giving people something they don't get anywhere else.
Good point, Dad. All right. Our first topic of this evening. The FBI has carried out a raid at Georgia's Fulton County election office, seizing materials related to ballots from President Trump's 2020 election loss. Democratic lawmakers and voting rights groups are condemning the FBI's raid of Georgia's election office, calling the move a serious threat to election integrity.
Couldn't agree more. It is a very serious threat to election integrity. This goes way beyond Trump's obsession with 2020 and, his continuing big lie that he really won that election, despite the findings of his own Justice Department, his own cybersecurity operation. Election officials in every state, most of them Republican, about 60 lawsuits, all of which Trump lost. He can't let go of 2020. But it goes way beyond his ego-driven obsession. The really frightening thing here is that they're going to gin something up, that's going to be hard to refute. It's from 6 years ago about irregularities, fraud, rigged elections in 2020, which is going to give them an excuse to crack down on the 2026 elections, the midterms, and not to make sure they're fair, but just the opposite, to rig them in some way in favor of Donald Trump's Republican Party. There is independent evidence of this. Pam Bondi wrote a letter to officials in Minnesota and said, we can dampen down on our immigration enforcement.
You're right.
If you do one thing for us. And what was that? What did she demand? Not that they round up immigrants on their own, right?
Voter rolls.
Voter rolls. What do voter rolls have to do with immigration enforcement, Sam?
Not a lot.
How about nothing? This just shows what their real motivation in all of these actions are. They want to get a handle that is going to enable them in some way to spike the fairness of the 2026 election. There is no other explanation for trying to tie immigration enforcement to the provision of voter rolls. You know, the two have about as much in common as the moon does with green cheese. You know, nothing to do with one another. So here we get, you know, this attempt to extort, and it's nothing more than extortion, voter rolls from Minnesota, and then we have this FBI search of voting records.
No, it wasn't just a search; it was a raid. They
Search and seizure.
Yeah,
right?
They took the stuff.
What, 700 pallets of ballots?
I saw some county officials saying that a few days ago, everybody knew where the ballots were. They were secure in the Fulton County offices. Now, he said that he doesn't know where they are. He doesn't know who has them, etc.
And what does Tulsi Gabbard have to do with this? She's supposed to be keeping us safe from domestic internal terror, from foreign threats, from foreign hacking into our infrastructure and our politics. What in the world is she doing, spending her time going through an election from 6 years ago that was more thoroughly investigated and litigated than any election in U.S. history, including the disputed election of 2000, which focused on just one state?
Her being there is such a red flag.
It is a complete red flag and shows, you know, just what the nefarious motivations are here. Moreover, you know, Georgia has always been a particular focus of Donald Trump and his allies. And particularly, they have focused on Fulton County, Sam, which is not only Democratic, but what's its demography? Black and minority. They always zero in on areas that are black and minority, whether it's Fulton County, where Atlanta is, Detroit, Philadelphia. Those are the areas where they claim voter fraud is taking place. And this is not occurring in a vacuum either. When it really mattered, and we had a chance to prove something, Trump made extensive fraud claims about voter fraud in Georgia, both in public statements and in filings under oath. He did so. And I know about this because I researched this for a case I was involved in as an expert witness in Georgia. He kept making these false statements even after his attorney, John Eastman, informed him that the claims were not accurate. U.S. District Court Judge David Carter, who presided over litigation on the release of Eastman's emails, found that emails show, quote, that President Trump knew that the specific numbers of voter fraud were wrong, but continued to tout those numbers both in court and to the public, unquote. So a federal judge saying that the evidence showed that Donald Trump knew what he was saying was false, but continued to perpetrate these false claims. None of the charges about voter fraud in Georgia gained any traction whatsoever in state or federal court, and they were refuted by the Republican administration in Georgia. Georgia's not Maryland, Sam. It's run by Republicans, by conservative Republicans. And it was his claims were thoroughly refuted by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and by the Republican Deputy Secretary of State Gabriel Sterling. Moreover, the lies about the 2020 election were directly delivered to the state legislature of Georgia by guess who, Sam? Trump's good buddy, his personal attorney?
Rudy Giuliani.
You got it exactly right. He reiterated the lies to the legislature of Georgia to try to get them to overturn the free and fair election. He and associates that he brought with him presented lurid, utterly debunked, ridiculous charges, including China sending ballots to the United States, technology being used from the long-dead Venezuela president, Hugo Chavez flipping votes from Trump to Biden, Italian satellites manipulating the votes.
Now, you know what's interesting about that is, obviously, I said earlier, Tulsi Gabbard being involved in this is a major red flag just because who she is. But being in the DNI and mostly working in foreign intelligence, a lot of people are assuming that her involvement means that the Trump administration is going to say, or already said to a judge who gave them this court order to raid the offices, that there's some sort of, they're going to claim that there's some sort of foreign interference going on here.
Those theories were totally debunked 5 and 6 years ago.
So
I don't know where they found a judge.
That's what I was about to ask, is how did they, if it's so nonsensical, they had to present some sort of evidence to this judge. What evidence did they provide to this judge? And I know you can judge shop, blah, 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 but these theories are so out there. It makes me pause and think, what the hell did they present to this judge, and how did this judge approve this?
Apparently it was a magistrate judge, not a full judge. There are hundreds of judges. You know, you could probably find a judge to agree to almost anything. Look what Aileen Cannon did, you know, overturning almost 170 years of precedent, 150 years or so, saying, you know, the special counsel was illegally appointed and we have to dismiss the case and we can't reveal any information about it. Who would have thought any judge would go there? And the other thing that's so telling, Sam, is apparently the U.S. attorney who got this search warrant is not from Georgia. It's from Missouri.
Crazy.
Not only were they judge shopping, apparently, I can't prove that, but it seems like they're U.S. attorney shopping.
That's insane.
It's the same thing, you know, with the indictments against Comey. They couldn't get the regular, you know, experienced U.S. attorney to sign off on it. So they brought in this totally unqualified person who had been an insurance lawyer, had never prosecuted a case.
Right.
Lindsay Halligan, and illegally made her a U.S. attorney. And the judge, of course, threw that out. Moreover, Giuliani claimed that 2 African-American, of course, poll workers, were passing around a thumb drive with votes on it. And, of course, Giuliani played on the horrific stereotypes of black people, saying they were passing it around like they were vials of heroin. Of course, he actually said that. Of course, what they were passing around was a mint. No, they weren't, you know, passing around thumb drives with votes on them. Not only this, Giuliani's lies were so thoroughly debunked that he had to admit he was disbarred, in part based upon all of these lies he told about Georgia, and the 2 African-American poll workers sued him and got a $143 million judgment for his outrageous defamatory lies.
Let's talk about what's happening now, 'cause I think we've all heard this many, many times. I don't really want to go back and relitigate the 2020 election.
It's very important we do, because
okay. I feel like most people
we've got to show all of this is based on outrageous lies, and people don't necessarily know exactly what Giuliani was telling the Georgia state legislature.
Okay,
and why it was so outrageous.
You can continue, but I do feel like we've heard this many, many, many times. My question for you is what's happening now, and especially with, if you look at the series of events, right? Trump gives this Davos speech where he says, essentially, the 2020 election is stolen and people are going to start being prosecuted. Then we get the Pam Bondi extortion, and now we have the Fulton County raid. Now, before all of that, there's an important part that some people have brought up. The president of Venezuela, which the Trump administration and Trump himself had tried to tie to 2020 election fraud, is now here in America in an American prison. Is that sketchy to you?
The whole thing,
given the timeline and the context of all this.
And, you know, they have tremendous leverage on Maduro, right? You know, because he is in custody, his future depends upon what the Trump administration decides to do. So, yes, one of the things we try to do on this show is not just give historical perspective, which I've just done. And I've got to just give you one more thing about the history. One more sentence. This is the Deputy Secretary of State, Sterling, a staunch Republican, who said, quote, "I will go to my grave knowing that Rudy Giuliani looked the state senators in the eye and just flat out lied." This is, as far as the basis that they're using, to recreate all of these claims about a rigged election, particularly in Georgia. But you're right, Sam. You got to put it all together. This FBI raid is not in isolation. It has to be looked at in conjunction with the 3 other episodes that you've talked about. The Bondi extortion, Trump's claims of prosecution, and having the former head of state of Venezuela in custody. What this matters for the moment is it looks like all of this is part of an effort to cook up a batch of new lies about election fraud, which enable them to interfere with the integrity of the 2026 midterms, just as they interfered with the integrity of the 2020 results, setting up slates of false electors, pressuring election officials to change the results, inciting the mob to try to interfere with the counting of the vote on January 6th. They've done it before, but this time it's much more insidious because they're doing it well in advance of the election, not as a catch-up play after they already lost.
It's really sketchy, scary stuff. Mom said in the chat, they could pressure Maduro to falsely confess to interfering with U.S. elections.
Exactly. That was my point.
Right.
He's at their mercy. He'll say anything they tell him to say in return for lighter treatment. What does he care? He has nothing to lose. He has no stake in this. He'll say anything, no matter how falsely outrageous. Couldn't be much more outrageous than the flat-out lies that Rudy Giuliani was telling the Georgia state legislature, which got him disbarred and got a $140-some-odd million judgment against him. And the 2 African-American women who he so outrageously defamed with his lies got death threats. They had to go into hiding. It had a profoundly detrimental effect on their lives.
And the strange thing about the whole Maduro thing is, have we ever in history, at least not in modern history, I think the U.S. very rarely gets involved in assassinating foreign leaders, right? But there are some CIA possible involvements in it. But
there are some. Ngo Diem in 1963.
Right. Okay. My point is, have we ever captured one of them and brought them back to the U.S.?
Yes.
Oh, we have done that before. Oh, okay.
That was Panama, the head of state of Panama, who we captured.
But it's just sketchy to me that
States. It's very, very rare.
It's just a little weird to me that they're so worried about Maduro, but they brought him back to the U.S. And again, maybe having him admitting that there was some election. I don't know. It just all seems very strange to me.
Right. And the thing is, their modus operandi is lying. Not just about the 2020 election, when they continue to pile on the lies even after they're totally debunked. But look at all the lies they've been telling about what's going on in Minneapolis and in other cities with respect to ICE violence against American citizens and others. Their immediate reaction. Remember, we talked about this last time. New York Times went through 16 instances. Every instance, they say the same thing. And when they have to prove it, it falls apart. So their automatic response to anything is to lie. And the problem is they control the government. They have the most powerful force behind them in the world. And They've shown no inclination to follow court orders. A Republican-appointed judge in Minnesota said in nearly 100 cases they have defied court orders in Minnesota.
I want to give a big shout out to George Politis, who donated $159.99 Australian dollars. They said that they think Trump is being a sore loser. Well, that's for sure.
That's for sure, but it goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
As Sam says, it's one thing to go back and see how outrageously they lied, how every court found against them, but we want to look forward. We want to warn everyone that the real danger here is clearly, Bondi's letter pretty well proves it. They're looking for some pretext to interfere with the 2026 midterm elections, because they know in a free and fair election they're going to get trashed.
Our next topic. President Trump and Senate leaders say they have reached a deal to keep the federal government funded. We're going through another shutdown fight here, hopefully averting a potential shutdown, but they still need to vote, and Mike Johnson is already being a little wishy-washy.
You know, reminds me of the movie Groundhog Day, right? We seem to be returning to the exact same scene every time. You know, how many times have we come down to the wire with this funding of the government? We kick the can down the road, and a few months later, we're back in exactly the same spot. It's all well and good that Senate leaders have reached an agreement, but we got to deal with that toady, Mike Johnson.
Oh, not the toady.
I know, it's hard to believe. Arguably the worst speaker in the modern history of the United States, who never seems to have the House in session because he can't control it.
Right, that was his excuse this time, right? Was that, well, it's going to be hard we're out of session, and it's going to be hard to get the members all back to vote on this potential deal.
Where was he? He knew that the vote was coming up. He knew the deadline was Friday, right? Why didn't he have the House in session and ready to vote? And any responsible speaker, any speaker who cared about the country, would have had the House already in session, ready to vote, so we don't have to go through, once again, the agony of even a partial government shutdown. But it looks like maybe because of Mike Johnson's dereliction of duty, it looks like, at least for a few days, we might have a government shutdown, despite the working of a deal, which, by the way, is another temporary deal. We're going to be back in Groundhog's Day again pretty soon.
That's annoying. Now, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I know a lot of this is about DHS funding and ICE funding, which is super important. I mean, we can't just give this essentially Trump army a blank check. But is this shutdown strategy working for Democrats? Because it seems like Republicans are literally willing to spill blood. I mean, they were going to stop like food stamps last time. So if you're negotiating with people who are essentially willing to starve Americans, is it even worth going down this path?
Yes and no. You're 100% right. Republicans don't care. You know, many on the right have said, you know, compassion, that's a terrible thing. We need to get rid of compassion for others. And they've certainly shown that in their actions. They do not care about inflicting misery upon others while making the rich, the very rich, even richer, having a more lavish lifestyle. They've made it clear what their priorities are. So you're right. It's not an effective tool. It didn't get the Obamacare subsidies renewed. And now over 1 million people have already lost their health insurance. There may be more. Others, you know, are facing horrible choices between paying for health care and paying rent and food and clothing. So they don't care.
Right.
But at least it has some value in making a statement. And showing the Democrats do have some backbone. But you're right. In the long run, in terms of a strategy to actually force the Republicans to do something, so far it's not been very effective.
And I was sort of critical of them last time. I felt like they gave up too easily. And you were actually defending them on this point. And now I've sort of moved to that.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. If you're going to go through a shutdown, you might as well fight. But
Right.
continuing to like tease, we're going to shut down. I don't know. Eventually it's like, Republicans aren't willing to negotiate, and they're willing to starve
don't care.
Americans so they don't have to negotiate.
As the great late Yogi Berra once said, "What you gonna do?"
Right. Don't forget to like the stream. You could do that right now. Click like.
And you can donate, can't you?
Yes.
And become members or donate members.
Border czar Tom Homan says the administration is planning an eventual reduction of federal law enforcement operations in Minnesota following weeks of heightened activity. Dad, are you buying it?
I wish I would buy it. You know, I might be willing for a day or two to give them the benefit of the doubt. But the only thing going on here is, you know, they're committed to what they were doing in Minneapolis and elsewhere. The only reason they might even be backing off at all is the backlash, is they realize these operations are a tremendous political loser for them. They don't care about the people harmed or even killed. You know, Stephen Miller called Preddy an assassin. Noam said he was engaged in domestic terrorism and out to massacre large numbers of people. You know, I read some comments from conservatives in which they smear this guy, claiming he was fired from his nursing job for inappropriate sexual behavior. An absolute flat-out lie. So they don't care about the people. They care about their political fortunes, and that's what this is all about. So maybe the politics is strong enough so there will be some let-up of this extreme type of enforcement in Minneapolis and elsewhere. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but they have to prove it.
Now, I have a question tied to both ICE and the possible new shutdown. I thought in the Big Ugly Bill, they gave ICE like $100 billion. I forgot what the number was.
They gave them a lot of money.
So is this even more money, or they're sort of relitigating the money they are?
As I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, even if he was a government shutdown, ICE still gets funded with the money from the Big Ugly Bill. So I don't think, and this is important to understand, a government shutdown is going to shut down ICE.
So this,
or Border Patrol.
So this current fight is a fight for even more money? I mean, they're already like the highest funded police military organization in like most of the Indian military isn't even funded as much as ICE is.
It's incredible.
So this is about even more money, or you're not sure?
I'm not sure. It's about putting restrictions on ICE or not funding them in the future. You know, the money from the Big Ugly Bill will run out unless there's further appropriations.
Gotcha. Newly released video shows Alex Preddy in confrontation with federal agents just 11 days before he was fatally shot in Minneapolis. If you haven't seen the video, he yells at the officers, he spits towards them, and he kicks out a headlight. They come out, wrestle with him. A lot on the right are using this video to smear Alex Preddy. I think anybody who looks at this objectively and in good faith knows that while Alex Preddy's actions in that moment might have been over the top, shouldn't have destructed their vehicle, it doesn't justify murdering the guy 11 days later.
As far as I know, kicking out a taillight is not a capital offense, and certainly not an offense for execution without any due process. Plus, the ICE folks or Border Patrol, whoever they were, clearly overreacted. You know, call the police if you think he committed a crime. Don't tackle him and wrestle him to the ground. That's not within your purview. He wasn't threatening you. He wasn't, threatening bodily harm. And apparently also he cracked a rib as a result of what they... But this is all distraction.
Right.
None of this has anything to do with whether or not they murdered him. Even if he was a terrible person, even if he was fired from his job, does that justify being executed?
No.
Of course not. That's all a complete red herring and distraction. And I understand how disturbed his parents are at these attempts to smear this guy. You know, I don't care who you are. if you have an outfit as big as the U.S. government out to smear you and destroy your reputation, they're going to find something. And what they found in this guy is so little. But again, it's all irrelevant. It's just an attempt to distract. The actions of those officers have to be evaluated unto themselves. They have nothing to do with what Mr. Preddy may have done a week before.
Now, interestingly, one thing I find interesting from the 11 days prior video is you can see Preddy has that gun in his backside. And in this confrontation with ICE, yeah, he's aggressive. Yeah, he kicks out a taillight, but he never goes for his gun, not a single time, which I think is an important piece of evidence because we have two separate videos of Preddy. He has the gun, and neither time in confrontations with ICE does he choose to go for his gun, which to me shows that he at no point was intending to use that gun
against anyone.
Anyone. Well, against ICE.
Or anyone. As far as we know, the gun was never in his hand, or even close to being in his hand. Not even does any video show him reaching for it, much less having the gun in his hand. So. The only thing he had in his hand was a phone. Plus, let's not forget, after the guy had been shot the first time and was lying helpless, dying on the ground, they pumped multiple more shots into him. So whatever you may argue about self-defense, which I think is a completely bogus argument, how can you possibly say those additional, however many, 5 shots had anything to do with their attempt at self-defense? It had everything to do with their effort to make sure that they killed him. And even we saw one of the officers clapping. We saw another one saying boo-hoo.
Glow in the chat says people are saying that it was a targeted assassination. I have seen that, especially from a lot of people on the left, saying that that confrontation 11 days before his killing, they added him to their database. They had him targeted. When they saw him 11 days later, they tried to find an excuse to kill him. I haven't seen any concrete evidence for that other than just people
speculating. It's not outlandish speculation. That's why you need an independent investigation.
Right.
DHS is not going to conduct an impartial, thorough investigation of itself. They've already gone on record exonerating the officers and blaming the victim. You think they're going to turn around and complete a thorough investigation that's going to charge these officers with murder? Not a chance.
Speaking of that, there have been several prosecutors involved in the Alex Preddy case that are already considering resigning, citing concerns over how the investigation into his killing is being handled.
Didn't some also resign after the Good case because they were not doing a thorough investigation? Instead, they were investigating her wife.
Now, what do you think about that? I'm sort of conflicted. Like, on one hand, I understand they don't want to be part of a tainted investigation. They don't want to be involved in a corrupt administration. But also, like, we need these people. We can't have all the good people just
thorough
leave.
Investigation of itself. I know. It's a horrible dilemma for them. But I guess they have to do what's right for them personally. You know, my heart goes out to them because on the one hand, we do need them. But on the other hand, I can understand why in their personal life, they do not want to be involved in a corrupt administration and in a bogus investigation. Very, very difficult dilemma. This is, an age-old dilemma. If you're part of a corrupt organization, do you stay and try to work from within, or do you distance yourself and run as far as you can? There's no good answer to that.
Should we do a poll?
Do a poll.
So what would the poll be? If do you I'm not how would I phrase it?
If you're part of a corrupt operation,
yeah.
Do you work from within inside?
Okay.
Or leave?
Okay, that's a good one. While I'm doing that, you can begin our next topic, which is the Supreme Court is set to hear a case that could determine whether only Republican-led states can draw aggressive partisan gerrymanders. Huh?
Well, back in 2000, I forget the exact date, but recently, Supreme Court decided that political gerrymandering was not something a court could consider. So a court could not overturn, a federal court could not overturn a gerrymander on the grounds it was designed to favor one party over another. They could invalidate a gerrymander because it was a racial gerrymander, but it's a very high bar for that. They have to prove, the challengers, that the gerrymander had the intent not to give an advantage to partisans, but had the intent of denying the right to vote for candidates of their choice of minorities. There was some pretty strong evidence that that's what exactly happened in Texas. And a lower court had ruled that the Texas gerrymander was an illegal racial gerrymander. Supreme Court overturned that. There is now a similar case being brought in California with, according to reports, much weaker evidence of racial gerrymandering. But there are some who are afraid that the Supreme Court will have a double standard, that they'll allow the Texas gerrymander despite stronger evidence of racial gerrymandering and strike down the California gerrymandering because one is Republican and the other is Democratic. I'm not endorsing that theory, but I'm just saying there are some who are worried about that.
A federal judge has allowed construction to resume on a $4.5 billion Vineyard wind offshore project, rejecting the administration's attempt to halt it.
This is part of the climate change denial of this administration, essentially taking us back to the dark ages of science before even the scientific method was fully fleshed out, denying now what are now decades of conclusive scientific findings by nearly 100% of statured scientists who publish in peer-reviewed journals that human burning of fossil fuels is mightily contributing to catastrophic global warming that threatens our planet and humanity. For some reason, even though Donald Trump and his whole family recognized that way back in 2009 when they wrote a letter to then President Barack Obama, they are now engaged in this blind, non-scientific climate change denial, erasing even any mention of climate change and trying to shut down projects that are producing clean, renewable energy, like this wind farm that was 95% complete, Sam, and they wanted to stop it, that operated during this recent storm and freeze calamity, and operated well and provided clean, safe, renewable power. There is absolutely no reason to shut down this and other clean energy projects other than to satisfy the Republican base. And Republicans virtually are the only group in the world engaged in this deep-seated climate change denial. Remember, I think the U.S. is the only nation to withdraw from the Paris Accords on climate change. You know, this non-scientific, totally nihilistic-driven policy places every one of us in jeopardy. And I don't know why there isn't enough outrage about it.
With that, we will move on to our question portion of the show. Before we do so, we have over 900 people watching, only 400 likes. Make sure you like the stream. It helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. We're trying to get to 180,000 subscribers. We're very close. I think we're like less than 500 away. So make sure you subscribe or share our videos, our episodes, our shorts around the interwebs. Members and donators get priority on questions. Are you ready for your first question of the night, sir?
I am always ready, and I know how terrific the questions are from our audience, some of which challenge us.
Good point. This is from Mass Man 1978. They say, Dr. Lichtman and Sam, thank you both for all that you do. You are a much-needed voice of reason at this time, which I would liken to Roosevelt's fireside broadcast.
Wow, that's high praise
That's
indeed.
high praise.
Thank you.
They say, I frequently hear comparisons between this moment in our country and pre-World War II Germany. What do you think about the idea that the proliferation of cameras in our society is a protective factor against the U.S. completely falling into a fascistic dictatorship? Follow-up question. Are there any protective factors that separate our country from pre-World War Germany?
I didn't catch the follow-up, but I'll answer the first one. Yes, you're 100% right. Look at the difference between the shootings when we have video and the shootings where we don't. When you don't have video, that pretty much gives the administration carte blanche to present their own version of events, however far from the actual facts they may be. But without video, without seeing things with your own eyes and hearing things with your own ears, it becomes very difficult to refute the lies perpetrated by the likes of Secretary Noem and White House advisor Miller. Didn't have that in the 1930s. It's a very, very important safeguard, which why they hate people like Mr. Preddy filming what they're doing.
Right. This is a $5 donation from Warriors Come Out to Play 79. They say, partisan politics has broken the checks and balances of three government branches. Did the founders really never foresee this? It seems inevitable now.
Can I have my drink?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The founders absolutely foresaw this. James Madison, the great architect of checks and balances within the government, I'm paraphrasing, said, you can set up all the safeguards that you want in a constitution or other documents, but in the end, our freedoms still comes down to having virtue in government. If there is no virtue, then safeguards can be destroyed. John Adams, someone of very different political persuasion in the early republic, reiterated exactly the same thing that James Madison said. You've got to have virtue. If that goes out the window, then all our liberties and freedoms are in jeopardy.
This is a question from member Patrick Murray. They say,
oh, an old friend.
Trump's erasing black history, supporting the oppression of minorities with ICE and racist rhetoric. His first of many lawsuits was about race. When are we going to call it what it is? Donald Trump is a white supremacist. Do you agree?
I'm not sure I would go that far. I would call him a white nationalist. No question about it. He and his allies have made that crystal clear. Just read I keep referring you back to this because it's all there in black and white. You don't have to take my word for it. Read the 1776 report, Donald Trump's official account of the American heritage, and you can see it is essentially a white nationalist, politically driven document. And more, we see conservatives in this country, very sadly, embracing white nationalist leaders, white nationalist symbols, and white nationalist ideas. Russell Voigt, one of the most powerful men in Washington, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, was and an architect of Project 2025, which, by the way, is replete with white nationalism, was caught on tape saying, yes, I admit, I am a white nationalist. And only a white nationalist would be erasing all of these traces of the African-American experience from our educational and cultural institutions. It's just horrific. It's a made-up, politically driven, phony view of our heritage. And, you know, as George Orwell said, who controls the past controls the present. And that's what this is all about.
What's the difference in your mind between a white supremacist and a white nationalist?
Well, I think a white nationalist is not quite as extreme. A white nationalist would agree that white people are in a special category, that America was founded by white people, and, it's not just principles, but also race. A white supremacist would go further and say, only white people deserve rights. Only white people should be voting. Only white people are true, functioning, intelligent human beings.
Gotcha. As we mentioned earlier, Democratic senators reached a deal to fund DHS for 2 more weeks to negotiate for ICE and Border Patrol restraints. Is this a good move? You think we talked about that? Yeah, I think we talked about that
at some length.
This is a $20 donation from Squirrely Squirrel. They say, how can ICE justify basically imprisoning over 3,000 children like Liam Ramos?
They can't. They claim, we're taking care of the kids. Well, we know that, I'm not sure about your number, by the way, but I'm going to answer the substance of it. We know that these ICE facilities are disastrous. They're not hygienic. People aren't taken care of. They don't get proper medical care. They don't get decent places to stay. It just is horrific to think about children being confined in these terrible, terrible facilities.
They like to blame American right likes to blame the presidents, the parents. They say, well, if the president, why do I keep saying presidents? If the parents didn't come here illegally, then we wouldn't have to intervene and blah, 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 blah.
Always blaming the victims.
Right. And obviously, again, if you look at this in good faith, movement doesn't, the penalty for movement across borders shouldn't be imprisoning children and separating families.
Right. And they've now made a very important twist in their claims about what they're doing. People haven't noticed it, but it's critical. For a very long time, they're saying, we're taking out the worst of the worst, right, Sam?
Yeah.
The murderers, the rapists. Well, now they've changed their tune and saying anyone who crosses the border illegally is a dangerous criminal because you've broken the law.
They've been saying that for a long time, though.
Well, I haven't noticed it as much as recently.
My big problem is that movement across lands, across borders, if it's legal or illegal, the punishment for that does not deserve family separation, imprisonment, etc.
In horrible conditions, I think in violation of the constitutional prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment, just as kicking out a taillight does not justify execution, extrajudicial execution.
Right. Have you heard about the national shutdown plan for tomorrow? Basically a work, school, shopping boycott for the whole day to stop ICE. If so, do you have any thoughts on it, and do you think it could help motivate a more general strike?
I hope so. If you follow this show at all, we've been very strong advocates of grassroots activity, grassroots activism. So any national movement to try to demonstrate our outrage about what's going on is something I can support.
Minnesota's U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar today officially launched her 2026 campaign for governor. If elected in November, she would succeed Tim Walz and become the state's first female governor. It's not really a question, more of a statement.
I don't know what the question is, but I think it's likely that she will be elected governor, given the trends, how well Democrats have done in elections to this point. But it does open up a Senate seat.
Yeah, but it's in Minnesota. It's pretty safe.
It's pretty safe.
JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, announced a 26 run for Nadler's seat in Congress. Schlossberg, that's a hard name to say, at least for me. 32, he's my age, said he would seek a seat representing New York's 12th congressional district. You think a Kennedy family link will help the Democrats in general?
Let me say, first of all, Jerry Nadler is an old friend of mine. He was my debate partner.
Schlossberg.
At Stuyvesant High School back in the 1960s when we revolutionized public school debate in the city of New York. Jerry sad to see you go, but I want you to, have a wonderful, fulfilling retirement. And, I don't think having an upright Kennedy as opposed to RFK Jr. will hurt the Democrats.
Yeah, I don't think so either. You kind of wish that, you don't really want this American royal family, and, you wish for new blood, but at a certain point, what works, works.
Yeah, I don't think there is a Kennedy at this point in elective office, so it's not like we're inundated with the Kennedy family.
Good point. Good point. This is from Diane. They say, it makes me angry that Tom Homan and friends are still calling migrants illegal aliens, like they came from another planet. I fear that things aren't going to change much in Minnesota, although ICE may be leaving Maine. What are your thoughts about a possible government shutdown? And I think we touched on most of that.
We touched on that, but let me say I agree with you. To the extent they're going to change at all. It's not because Homan doesn't agree with what they've been doing. He's one of the worst of the hardliners, in my view. It's just that they're trying to diminish the political backlash. They are now deeply underwater on immigration, which is supposed to be their signature issue. I just saw a new poll today, I think from Pew. Trump is down to 37% approval. That is utterly abysmal, particularly for a president in their first year. More Americans, by a wide margin, think ICE is going too far than think ICE is doing the right thing or not going far enough. There even now is a big turnaround about abolishing ICE, which was unthinkable a few weeks ago.
What's the deal with, I see a lot of people on the right saying, well, Obama gave Tom Homan a medal at some point.
He did. Homan is a long-term veteran of border operations, but did turn sharply to the right and become very much of a hardliner, as I understand it, once he became associated with Trump.
Right.
How's our poll doing?
Oh, right. If you find yourself in a corrupt situation, do you stay and try to fix from the inside or leave? 58% say leave, 42% say stay.
Yeah, so that validates what we've been saying. It's a dilemma.
Yeah.
There's not a clear answer. And each individual has got to decide for themselves based on their own circumstances and their own values. There's no universal right answer.
I'm not exactly sure what this question is, but I'll throw it to you. Maybe you'll understand it better. This is a $5 donation from Tina. They say, let me say this differently. Please speak on SCOTUS 8 guidelines for deadly force. Yeah.
So there are guidelines. I'm not familiar with all of them for deadly force. And even Stephen Miller, the hardliner of the hardliner, after the big backlash said, well, maybe those who executed, he didn't use those words, executed Alex Preddy, were not following protocol. So there are clear guidelines under what circumstances you can use deadly force, typically only when there is an imminent danger of death or extreme bodily harm to you or one of your fellow officers. You're not supposed to fire at fleeing suspects or fire into cars that are moving away from you.
I've heard, a lot of people talking about getting rid of Nome, getting rid of Bovino, but I think the real guy you got to get rid of is Stephen Miller. I think he's
wrong.
No?
Donald Trump. It all starts from the top. All of this, everything they're doing, Bovino, Miller, Nome, is all consistent with what Donald Trump wants them to do. If you get rid of them, you'll just get some other toadies doing the same thing. This is what I said about Matt Gaetz. Remember? Everyone was up in arms about Matt Gaetz. And I said, Matt Gaetz is a feint. They're going to get rid of him. They're going to put in someone who looks better, like Pam Bondi, but is going to be just as bad.
I hear what you're saying, but to me, Stephen Miller seems like more of a puppet master. Gaetz and Bondi or Nome, but you can interchange those people with other bad people. But to me, it seems like Stephen Miller is the one coming up with a lot of the ideas, these horrific ideas that we're seeing play out in our country.
You may have a point there. You may have a point. I don't know how replaceable he is. And certainly there'd be some symbolic value in getting rid of that whole crew. But again, nothing will fundamentally change until there's a change at the top.
I think that's a fair point, too. This is from our...
Harry Truman was famous for saying, the buck stops here.
Yeah. This is from member Dirtier Dog. They say, Professor, as wealth inequality reaches levels not seen since the Gilded Age, why hasn't it produced the same kind of mass reform movements yet? And is that historically anomalous?
It is a bit historically anomalous. The great wealth and income inequalities of the late 19th and early 20th century, in part, were responsible for some of the great reforms that we saw under Presidents Wilson and Roosevelt. But, to get the major reforms, which were FDR's New Deal, it took the tragedy of a Great Depression. In other words, income, wealth, inequality is a bit abstract until it comes home to the kitchens and living rooms of Americans. It doesn't seem to be an issue that moves people, although it should. It's one of the most important indicators of a healthy society and a healthy democracy.
This is a $10 donation from Secular Monk. They say, with Canada agreeing to a huge trade deal with China and the EU, completing one with, I'm not sure what this is.
Myanmar?
Mercosur? I'm not sure what that is.
They may mean Myanmar.
Mercosur.
No, I don't know what that is.
Whatever. With China and the EU, it seems like our allies are just moving on to other deals rather than trading with the U.S. Thoughts?
You're absolutely right. Trump's dealing with our allies is like trying to catch a fish by throwing an anchor at it. You can only antagonize them so much. You can only be so erratic and so punitive and so dismissive before allies are going to seek alternative paths to their own interests. Absolutely. Trump, we've talked about this a lot, how so many of Trump's policies in the end are reverberating to the benefit of Russia and China, including his dismantling, for example, of USAID, and his dismantling, despite now having Tulsi Gabbard somehow worrying about foreign interference, they dismantled that part of law enforcement designed to combat foreign interference in our elections. They basically shut it down.
People in the chat are schooling us. They say Mercosur is a South American trade agreement.
Okay.
Hey, we learned something new.
Yeah.
This is a $5 donation from Akron Zips. They say, Professor, have you started the 13 keys for 28 prediction? Any keys false that you can share with us or where some are leaning as of today?
Yeah, I get an email every day about this, and I always give the same answer, and you know what it is, Sam, right?
You haven't even...
It's too early.
Too early, yeah.
And, I still have to consider whether, after 45 years, these particular keys still work as effectively as they have. Having been right for 40 years until finally wrong after that. It's a pretty good record, but, one of the requisites of being an honest scholar, researcher, is you got to recognize limitations.
Here's a really good point from our good friend Philip H., and it goes back to the point about sort of the underlying issue of immigration and how much this administration outright lies and twists reality. And this is what Philip says. Let's be clear. Trump canceled several legal immigration programs and put those here legally into alien status. 3 to 4 million undocumented immigrants fall into this category. They came here legally. And that's a really good point that a lot of people are not
temporary protective status.
Right. It's like you're here, you came here legally, and then one day you wake up and you're suddenly
a criminal.
Undocumented, right.
Yeah, but not just undocumented. Now, according to Homan, you're a criminal.
Right.
And deserve to be treated like a criminal.
Right. And there's so much nuance like this to immigration that this administration, again, not only doesn't put out there actively lies about and twists reality so that people don't know things like this.
And what's even worse, or just as bad, is they now want to deny U.S. citizenship to the children of undocumented immigrants in direct contradiction to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And it would throw us back to the worst of authoritarianism because you would have to check the parentage, the birth parentage, the citizenship parentage of every single set of parents of every child born in the United States to determine whether or not they deserve U.S. citizenship. Nothing could be more horrific.
We've got some breaking news here on Lichtman Live. This was reported an hour ago from CNN. They say Trump sues the IRS and Treasury Department for $10 billion over tax return leak.
Oh, he's suing himself. He says, I'm in charge of all these agencies. I can do whatever I want. So I suppose he could settle this lawsuit and give himself $10 billion.
Jeez Louise.
And remember, what did he promise us 10 years ago about his tax returns?
They were coming.
They're coming.
Just like the Epstein files.
Just like what?
The Epstein files.
Yes, the Epstein files. They're coming.
They're on their desk.
Coming. They're on the way. They're on our desk. They're coming.
Man, that's crazy. All right. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. A couple shout outs to some donators. George Politis with another donation. Joanne Roberts, who says, thank you as per usual for your work. Also for your kind wishes regarding my son. Oh, gosh, I don't know if I can pronounce this. I don't want to butcher it, but the disease her son has sucks. Thank you, Joanne. Tina, Limited Light says, go watch the Melania movie.
Oh, my God. I'd rather have pins and needles stuck in my eyes.
Happy 200th. Thank you from Limited Light. All right. And I think we got a couple last-minute donations from Sharon. Thank you so much, Sharon. Robs, thank you. And Need Pyrrhus, 9068. And our poll is, if you find yourself in a corrupt situation, do you stay and try to fix from the inside or leave? 60% say leave, 40% say stay.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. Thank you.
All right, here's my final word.
Well, I didn't cue you yet.
Oh,
man.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to thank everybody watching.
Yes, please do.
Dad.
I'm here.
Dad, what are your final words to the people?
Thank you, Sam. My final words are, we've passed 200. Kind of snuck up on us. So do you think we should have a post-200 show celebration since we missed the 200th celebration? What do you think, Sam?
What would that entail exactly?
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we can.
Maybe party hats and noisemakers, things like that.
Yeah, we can definitely think about it. Or we could just wait till 250.
We could.
We'll think about it.
We'll think about it. But one thing we don't have to think about is we'll keep coming at you with the best analysis that we possibly can. And if we don't know something like that one term we had some trouble parsing, we'll admit it,
Well, I don't know a lot.
Well,
you know most.
Yeah. All right. But, yeah, we do know most. But when we don't, we're forthright about it. But we try to give you insights, perspective, history that you're never going to get anywhere else. You could watch the mainstream media all day, and you won't get it.
We just got a last-second donation from Huosb 1768. How do you think you pronounce that? Huosb?
I can't really see it.
Huosb. Husab.
Yes.
You're a smart guy. I told you know everything. All right, folks. Good night. You punched the microphone.
For emphasis.
Thank you for doing that.